Hello, everyone. A warm welcome to you all. Myself, Yogesh Kovekar. I'm a solution architect in Tech Mahindra. Today, we have Mr. Saurabh Jha and Mr. Suresh Chandrasekaran with us. Saurabh heads Tech Mahindra's Global Data and Analytics, and Suresh is Denodo's Executive Vice President and Head of Global Partners. Thank you, Saurabh and Suresh, for joining us. Today, we are going to discuss about a new paradigm in data integration technology, that is data virtualization, and we are going to hear from these two industry leaders how it is becoming important these days for various customer requirements around data virtualization. So to begin with, Suresh, according to you, what are the key trends do you see in modern data integration and what role data virtualization plays in this? Yeah, please.
Hi, Yogesh. First of all, thank you for hosting us in this great meetup. I'm excited to be here and have this discussion with you and Saurabh. So in the broader scheme of things, right, we all know that the generally companies are getting more data driven, and what that means is they want to utilize the power of data not only for operational decision making but advanced analytics, etc. One of the challenges has been that while there's a lot of data and it's lots of great tools for analyzing them, being able to bring that to the business user in the context of the use case, whether it's analytical or operational, has been a challenge. So whether you call it data democratization or creating that data-driven culture, it's about bringing that data. So what the idea of data virtualization is it's not only data integration, but it's also data management, as in how we think about the semantic models and the data ways that data is represented in more business canonical way that the business users can understand data products and the data mesh, but security and all that. But more importantly, also data delivery. How can data be more easily made consumable through a marketplace catalog? So when you bring all those three concepts together, integration, management, and delivery, but in a logical platform, that's what data virtualization is. Why logical? Because you've already made investments in physical infrastructure, whether it be your relational databases, your legacy data warehouses, whether it's Teradata or Netezza, etc., but your new cloud data lakes, and you have partner data. How do I start to focus on delivering the data in a useful format without continuously copying and replicating this data 10, 15, 20 times? That's what data virtualization or logical data management, as we like to call it nowadays, is all about. So if that makes sense, that can help not only traditional BI dashboards, etc., but it can also help advanced analytics, machine learning, IoT, but it can also help application developers and data sharing. So these are the multiple use cases, and data virtualization is very, very relevant in this context today. Back to you.
And what do you think, Saurabh? What's your viewpoint on this?
So, see, in terms of trends in modern data integration, there are quite a few, right? So let's start with the reason why these trends are even there. The first reason, of course, is the sprawling sources of data, right? Now and there are two parts there. One is over the last decade or even more, businesses have kind of been given a free hand, so to say, to develop or invest in big data ecosystems. Right now, when you talk about big data ecosystems, we can start with your humble data warehouse. You can talk about large big data ecosystems that we have in the market, and then of course over the last 5, 7, 10 years, the whole movement towards cloud. Right? Why big data ecosystems? Because there is an inherent feeling that or inherent belief that this data can be utilized for the benefits that Suresh just talked about, operational as well as business ended and so on. Now, in addition to the internal data, of course, you have a lot of external data now coming in, right? Which includes data from social media, IoT, connected cars, and connected everything, basically. Now, if you look at the traditional way of data integration, it is traditional or legacy, as you would call it, and there are only certain ways that that it had been done in the past. The use cases on the consumption side were also limited. People would typically look at it for reporting and BI and dashboards, to look at historical data, probably do some trend analysis and so on. Now, again, let's say in the last 8 to 10 years, there has been a massive movement towards, a few major changes. One is real time. And when we say real time, not just real time data ingestion, but real time action on that data. So that has become a very important use case. Second thing that has become very important is prediction. So it's not just about historical data analysis, but also that if this, then what next, right? And there are multiple use cases around what next. Whether it's for upselling, cross-selling, or even in terms of your sales forecast, revenue forecast, or a whole plethora of use cases on that front. Now, what has happened is because of these new use cases coming in, and new data sources coming in, and new data types coming in, the legacy systems were not enough to actually manage it, right? And hence, over the last 8 to 10 years, we have seen, in addition to, let's say, the dozens of technologies which were already in place, now you have more dozens of technologies which have come in, right? And what that has created is a very complex quagmire, so to say, of integration platforms, data platforms, data models, and so on and so forth. And especially in the last 3 to 5 years, most enterprises in the world, I would wager on the fact that almost 90% of them are on this journey of what we typically call as data modernization, right? So data platform modernization or data modernization on cloud, whatever. But in some way to modernize their data platform and ecosystem so that they become more data driven, right? Because that is the primary use case. And like Suresh was saying, when we say data driven, it's all about removing subjectivity from whether it's your operational decisions or it's customer related decisions or business decisions, or even future your future planning, for example, should also be based on actual data rather than we think this will grow kind of a situation. So now you can imagine that with so much complexity that exists, there is a definite need of simplification, right? And there is no one or the other option. There are multiple options of simplification. However, simplification, as you know, is probably the hardest thing to achieve, right? And I believe that of the many options, data virtualization is also one of the options which can definitely simplify, your legacy, quagmire of the data ecosystem that has been set up. So that's what my take is on how data virtualization can play a role in the modernization of data platforms.
Absolutely, yes. As data is growing exponentially, data virtualization has become a mandatory. So moving ahead, Suresh, how can customers become future ready with technology like data virtualization introduced in their data landscape?
Yeah, Yogesh, I'm going to address that, but I want to pick up on what just Saurabh said about simplification. If there's one thing we're striving for, that's very important. So how can data virtualization help with simplification is also, first, let's start with this modernization idea, where all these changes are happening in the landscape or the data estate, new technologies, cloud technologies, etc. It's important to abstract and isolate the business users from what's happening here, so that while this is happening, the business is still able to function and get the data. The second is using a lot of intelligence in the data integration, data management, data delivery process. So looking for AI in not just in applications for the business consumer, but in the way we do data management, using metadata, active metadata, passive metadata to kind of suggest what should be integrated when, etc. Also, instead of copying the data 15, 20 times, seeing how we can leverage the sources and do intelligent acceleration, etc. So even in the data management world, I think data virtualization is all about time to market and agility and simplification at one level, at the data level, but from a business level, making it easy for consumption. Now, coming to your question about how can companies think about being ready for this in the future, there are several architectural or concepts that are happening today that are a combination of technology, architecture, and of course systems and processes. So one such is, for example, this idea of data mesh. The data mesh is an idea that different business units or different domain owners have ownership of their data, and therefore they are becoming more likely to use it in a data-driven way if they understand the data. But how do I have ownership of supplier data versus production data versus HR data, etc.? Is that you provide them the ways to manage it from both an understanding and model perspective, but also collaborate. There are data fabric kinds of architectures. There are logical data warehouse kind of architectures. Now, at any given time, one of this or the other is going to be more in vogue and less. But I like to kind of simplify that also. Again, I like the idea of simplification that Saurabh brought, is choose your best data platforms for price performance or whatever. But always, all of these architectures have an underpinning, which is think about the logical data management on top of your physical infrastructure. So whether you're streaming the data, it doesn't always have to be real time. Maybe some use cases near real time is good enough. So those are the ideas. Then the last idea of preparing for the future I also want to highlight, which is a new topic, is while there was a big rush to move all the data into cloud storage, which was extremely cheap, and we had the separation of storage and compute, many of the CIOs and CDOs I talk to now are very concerned about the escalating cost of compute in these new platforms. So this logical data management and the ability to kind of separate the IT aspect from the business aspect also provides the capability to understand the cost implications, or what we call FinOps aspects of how you manage your data landscape. And this is not to be ignored because it can bite you in the back if you're not careful about how you're managing your data estate. So this is something also we are very much focused on, is showcasing where and how the cost structures of data management are going to evolve as you make these changes.
Absolutely, yes. So Saurabh, why do you think data virtualization is necessary these days to become a future ready?
Okay, so see, the thing is, it's well, frankly, nothing is necessary. It all depends upon the use case and what a particular enterprise is trying to achieve, right? So everything is an option, Yogesh and Suresh. See, the thing is, let's say you go into an enterprise, okay? And, we always look at journey from left to right. When we talk about the data journey, from source to aggregation to logical, logical exposure to making it available in various forms, APIs or services or whatever. And then finally, you have the consumption layer, right? And I've said this many times in the past as well, that, when we try to design a modern data platform or a 2B architecture, so to say, right, future state architecture, the journey always starts from the right, okay, as to what they need. And I'll tell you where data virtualization really plays a great role. And see, on the right side, now, of course, there are certain functions which are absolutely fine with, the old data warehouse or the new data lake and lakehouse architectures. There is historical data, they can pull the data, play around, and so on and so forth. But there are certain functions and there are certain, business domains which have a very high requirement for trust in their data, okay? And they don't want data which is traveling through multiple hops. They want data directly from the source, okay? So that they are 100% sure that what I'm getting, what I get is what it actually is, rather than, because, what you're pulling out from the warehouse or lake house could be old. And, unless there is a very good discipline of quality that has been set up within the organization, and every single data point or element has a quality score. And trust me, I haven't seen too many, but if that is there, then it's fine, okay? But I think we're all aware that that's not the case, right? So there is always this question mark. Is this data even correct in the first place? However, if you're going directly to source, okay, and getting the data from there, then you are literally 100% sure that this data is correct, this data is fresh, and I can trust it. So I think that is a very, very important use case. And in different industries, like I said, there are different business domains and functions which need this. It's important for them. Whether you talk about regulatory reporting, for example, or you talk about fraud analytics, for example, these are real-time, immediate, 100% quality data that is needed, right? And that is a use case which I think is best solved using a data virtualization solution, right? Now, when let's say if I want to analyze my last 3 years of sales, I don't need this solution really. It's way above its pay grade, so to say, but or way below its pay grade, frankly. But when I need these, high ROI kind of solutions, where if I do not do it properly, I may have to pay a fine, or I may be sued for that matter, and so on and so forth, right? If the quality is not correct, or if the accuracy of the data is not correct. So those are definitely places where data virtualization has to be taken care of, where you directly touch the source systems and get data from there. Other thing is, Suresh touched upon data mesh. Now, data mesh, we all know it's an architectural framework, right? It's not a tool technology or whatever. It's basically about federated data ownership, federated data management, federated data governance, and so on, or a central governance, but federated management of governance, and so on and so forth. So what is the key component of a data mesh? The key components are ownership and ultimately data products, which each function provides to the other function, right? And everybody can be 100% sure that I'm getting the right data. Now, with the semantic layer that a data virtualization solution creates, and the common data model that it uses, and the kind of data products that it can create, which don't get impacted depending on whatever changes in the source system. That, I think, is another very good alternative. I'm not saying it's the way to go for data mesh, but it's definitely a very strong alternative to the other ways that are being used to implement data mesh. So that's definitely a very, very strong case on that side. So I think these two, in my mind, are two really powerful use cases where data virtualization can play a very important role, with organizations moving towards a data-driven future.
Absolutely, data quality is of utmost importance, and governance is also,
I think Suresh wants to add something.
Sure.
Yes, Yogesh, I'd like to piggyback on Saurabh's concept of trust, and he talked about multiple hops data makes. And even if it did make it, right, having that lineage and understanding of where and how it got transformed is important. But there's another very, very key thought in all of the customers I meet today, which is security and protection of private data, right? So the same concept applies. If I make multiple copies and hops of the data, who is protecting all those hops? So where do I put that logical layer of access control, granularity, masking, data encryption, even tokenization, and all of that? It can be done in each of the hops, but it's significantly easier and better if you can do it in combination with the sources, but also at the point of access. So this is actually another very important aspect. And I also want to basically also not say that when Saurabh talks about source systems, or I talk about source systems, it does not necessarily mean it's the original source. Like, we're not talking necessarily the core banking system or the CDRs in a telco, right? It could be one layer above that, an operational data store or the first level data warehouse. So I want to be very clear that when we say data virtualization, we're not like zero replication. We're talking about minimizing unnecessary replication, but taking advantage of data sets that are powerful and created, and not having to create 20 more data marts, for example, right? So there is a balance here, and we don't want to be like so rigid. And the use case matters. Sometimes you need historical data, you need to replicate it and store it. Yes, you need to. Sometimes you don't need to. And so the concept is logical first, as opposed to only real time. It's use case fit and being flexible and providing the capabilities for long term to kind of be more adaptable to the use case, while addressing the things that Saurabh and I have been talking about: governance, security, data access, data products. So I'd like to add that perspective.
Absolutely. Thanks, Surya. Very, very important points. I think the source point is very, very important, because that's, I think, a general misconception as well about data virtualization in the market. So thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah. Yes, these are really good insights. Yes, points noted. So, gentlemen, how would you like to conclude the session with any advice to organizations who are in the journey of their data landscape modernization? What do you think, Suresh? What advice?
Modernization will continue. And one thing I tell people is history always teaches us lessons. 30 years ago, people thought if I moved everything into this data warehouse, life will be good. 10 years ago, people thought if I moved everything into this thing called Hadoop, life will be good. And now everybody is talking about a data lake, But if you look today, the proliferation of technologies and where data lives, multi-cloud hybrid continue. So I would agree that on a particular use case, you could be better off just moving everything into one data mart or data warehouse and just getting the job done. But if you're really going to look ahead and be agile and want to build a strong capability, I would kind of beg to this. I would kind of qualify, say data virtualization is optional on a particular use case, but it is a must-have if you want to become a data-driven organization over the long term, because it provides all of these capabilities we already touched on, from providing business abstraction to security to governance to optimizing the use of data and the FinOps, that it would be unwise to ignore it even at the beginning of your data modernization journey, because we have yet to see all the other technologies and other changes that are yet to come. And companies will be better off for having adopted it now instead of waiting and then kind of scrambling. That's my kind of leave behind, if you will.
Sure. Thanks. Saurabh, what do you think? What are your views?
So there are two parts to my answer. The first part is, when we talk about data modernization, data platform modernization, I think, we get very siloed and narrowed in terms of our thinking, that we are only thinking about, okay, we have these 50, 100 data warehouses. What do we do? Should we take it to cloud? What technologies? And there are enough and more OEMs, vendors, tools, technologies, which try to solve that problem, right? And in full earnest. So I have a question for, these traditional large organizations, not question, but it's more like a food for thought. That if you were to set up your own company today, again, from scratch, how would your data platform look like, right? Because think of a bank, think of a fintech. Think of an insurance company, think of an insurtech. Think of a healthcare company, think of a health tech or whatever, right? So if you look at the architectures of these companies, the insurtechs, the e-commerce firms, and if you compare them to the previous, the age-old companies, these are much simpler, way more effective, and completely focused on the use cases. How do I improve customer experience? How do I bring down my operation cost? How do I, run my business sustainably, right? If we are not going to the drawing board with this thought process that, okay, this is all that I need to actually run my business effectively, then I think, we will just be, it's like this, if you have 100 things on your plate to eat, I mean, you will always struggle with where do I start? But if you have nothing on your plate, you can go and pick up exactly what you want, right? So that is the difference. It's now coming to why data virtualization. So the whole premise of what we have discussed so far is very simply this. And again, I'll go back to my whole point of simplicity. And that's why I gave that example of a traditional organization versus a similar organization which was born in the last 10 years. There is simplicity here, right? And they have done everything in a very simple manner. And if data virtualization can help you simplify your 10 years or 15 years of investment that you have made, if it helps you in simplification in terms of fulfilling the use cases that you have identified and prioritized, I think that is the way to go. If you, instead of investing in another big platform, making all those movements, yes, this is definitely a very viable alternative, why even an alternative? Like Suresh was saying, it does not have to be either or. It can be over and above, right? So even if you have a data lake, have put your stuff on cloud or a lake house or whatever, but if for your consumers, your business consumers, you can simplify consumption using data virtualization, you can help with quality, you can help with not only real time but even batch, for example, or not so real time data. And if you can help with data security, right, in a very easy to digest fashion, I think why not is the question, right? Why would you not do anything that actually simplifies your situation? So that will be my advice, that think from a simplicity standpoint, focus on what the business needs to do, and please look at the companies which have come up in the last 10 years who are doing exactly what you're doing, but in a much more efficient manner.
Absolutely. That's really important. Yes. Points noted.
Well
So,
said, Saurabh.
yeah. Thank you, Suresh. Thank you, Saurabh, for sharing your thoughts on this modern data integration trend using data virtualization. It was really an enlightening session, and we look forward to more such conversations with both of you in the future. Thanks to both of you, and wish you a great day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.